Hi Merfolk fans, I'm Joe. Thanks so much for tuning into my channel today. I am here with a replay of a match against Jeskai Control featuring Nahiri the Harbinger. Now this is exciting for me, or I should say I guess was exciting for me when I was actually playing the match, because this deck has sort of exploded onto the modern tournament scene, doing really well in some recent tournaments. It's got the support of, I think, a lot of pro players. Nahiri is being touted now as potentially the best card in Shadows over Innistrad, and she seems to fit really well into Jeskai Control Shell. I think some people might be trying out Mardu with Nahiri, but at any rate, I was excited to play against this particular deck to get a little bit of experience. I think I may have seen Nahiri, maybe my friend Rich was brewing with her at some point, but I haven't played her in one of these competitive Jeskai shells. So the idea with Nahiri is that you play her, you put her down, you're controlling the table with Path to Exile. I don't know why that card's not showing up right now. Snapcaster Mage, getting back Path to Exile. Lightning Bolts, Lightning Helix, lots of removal, just protecting Nahiri. Snapcaster can also do some blocking duty in a pinch. Just needs to protect her for 2 turns. The turn she comes down, you can plus her, going up to 6 loyalty right away. Discard a card and drawing a card. Very simple, sort of Jace, Vin, Prodigy, Merfolk looter stuff. Drawing you into, hopefully, some removal to keep protecting Nahiri for a little while. The next turn you untap, you plus her again, you're immediately up at 8. Now, if you can get to your next turn, you can -8. Just totally ultimate Nahiri. She'll leave the table, but you know the payoff is pretty huge. You get to search your library for an artifact or creature card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. It has haste, and at the beginning of the next end step, you have to return that creature back to your hand. So, if you don't know, you may have guessed that the best target for this ability is going to be Emrakul. So these decks play, I believe it's a singleton Emrakul. Doesn't really make sense to play more. And yeah, if they can let Nahiri just stick around for a couple turns, suddenly Emrakul's on the table, attacking, wiping the opponent's board. And at that point, the opponent can start to beat us down with Celestial Colonnade. So, all that being said, Jeskai Control featuring Nahiri the Harbinger. Let's see how it went. On my side of things, I have 2 lands, 2 blue sources, 2 AEther Vials, and then 3 creatures, Harbinger, Merrow Reejerey, and Master of Waves. Now, we don't know what the opponent's playing yet, but this is a pretty easy keep, pretty much against any deck. We can see it's actually going to be quite good against Control because their counter spells will be much less effective since we have double AEther Vial. So I'm going to keep, on the opponent's side of things, we can see they have 4 lands, which is exactly what a control deck wants to see in their opening hand, along with Path to Exile for some early control, a Snapcaster getting back Path to Exile for control in the mid-game, Celestial Colonnade to clean things up, and Nahiri as a win con. So it looks like a solid keep on the opponent's side as well. Alright, so 2 keeps. I'll open with Minamo, School at Water's Edge, and play AEther Vial. Now the opponent hit a spectacular top deck there for his first draw. Now, rather than play Celestial Colonnade tapped, I have to imagine he's going to get a blue source for Ancestral Visions. Ancestral Vision, singular. Don't want to mess that up. Alright, so we can see the opponent's going to have access to a ton of card advantage. I see immediately that he's on some kind of blue-white control. Harbinger of the Tides is probably not going to be worth very much, so it might be reasonable to play this guy out now to get some sort of clock established. At the very least, I'll go ahead and reveal Harbinger to bring Wanderwine Hub in untapped. But seeing again that it's a control deck, I'm just going to go ahead and play out my second AEther Vial. Being a little bit light on land, AEther Vial is going to serve as my mana this game pretty much. The opponent hit a land for the turn and goes ahead and plays that. Now, I have to assume that they played the Sulphur Falls specifically because they think that they might want to bring in Snapcaster Mage as a blocker or something like that at the end of turn, or just to establish a clock. They could flash him in and start attacking. A little bit strange. They already have white mana for access to Path to Exile, and they do have a Celestial Colonnade that needs to come out onto the battlefield tapped. So this seemed like a good opportunity to do that, but they seem to have missed that opportunity. On my upkeep, the first AEther Vial will go up to 2, the second one will go up to 1. I draw into a third AEther Vial, not very exciting. but hey, sometimes you draw kind of weird cards. So for the opponent's turn, he's going to play a tapped Steam Vents. Again, a little bit strange. He does need to play the Celestial Colonnade sometime tapped. I'll bring in a single Harbinger of the Tides at the end of my turn, at the end of the opponent's turn, excuse me. All the Aether Vials will take up, going to 3, 2, 1. Draw into a Master of Waves. Now, these Master of Waves are pretty powerful against Jeskai, against any control deck running red. We can see that Master of Waves cannot be targeted by Nahiri's -2, exiling target enchantment, tapped artifact, or tapped creature. She's a red planeswalker, so he has protection from red, cannot be targeted by her. Master of Waves is protected also from Electrolyze, Lightning Helix, Lightning Bolt. Path to Exile is a good one, and Snapcaster Path to Exile can get rid of both of my Master of Waves. So the opponent's hand looking pretty good right now. I've got a lot of creatures in my hand, and Jeskai doesn't play hand disruption, so I'm going to be able to get them out onto the battlefield with all these Aether Vials. However, with 3 cards coming soon with Ancestral Vision and Nahiri and plenty of lands, things are looking a little grim. Okay, opponent draws a Lightning Bolt. That's quite good. They're going to go ahead and pass the turn after playing a Desolate Lighthouse. The end step, I'll bring in the second Harbinger. The opponent's not going to have any creatures that I want to bounce. They could potentially they could attack with Celestial Colonnade, but it has Vigilance. So flying with and Vigilance. So Harbinger pretty much never gets to bounce him unless I. It need to be pretty tricky. I would need to have 4 lands up, have a Reejerey on the table. The opponent would need to activate Celestial Colonnade to block, and then I could tap 4 lands, bring in Harbinger at instant speed, tap it with the Merrow Reejerey trigger, and then bounce it with the Harbinger. But that's a lot of hoops to jump through. And I need bodies more than anything else, so I'll bring in the Harbinger right now on the opponent's end step, opting not to bring in the Reejerey. I don't want to overextend into a Supreme Verdict. I don't want to overextend into a Wrath of God or an Anger of the Gods. I draw another Harbinger. A little bit awkward, but better to draw bodies than to draw anything else at this point. I'm going to attack with both of these Harbingers here. And let's see what the opponent chooses to do with his tons of mana. Okay, so he goes for Electrolyze here. Now, this is a sign to me, although it cycles and that's a good reason to use it. This is a sign to me that the opponent doesn't have something like a Wrath of God or Supreme Verdict or Anger of the Gods in hand. Otherwise, he'd probably hold his spot removal up and then use his board wipe on the next turn. So this is kind of a green flag to me to start putting more of my creatures on the table. I'm starting to realize the opponent is going to develop a big mana advantage against me, and if I don't start to leverage my own resources in the form of creatures, the opponent might just run away with this really fast. So in response to the Electrolyze, I'm going to bring in, or try to bring in, Merrow Reejerey. Now the opponent knows, seemingly, that I play Kira, and so he may want to respond to this by targeting the other Harbinger before Kira comes in to prevent that from being able to happen. And he does do that. He'll bring Path to Exile, trying to exile this Harbinger of the Tide. So the stack is getting pretty complicated. Right now it looks like Electrolyze, Aether Vial, Path to Exile, and now the second Aether Vial. The opponent's tapped out at this point. He's not going to be able to respond to the second Aether Vial activation. So I'll bring in Master of Waves, making 5 tokens to take advantage of my Devotion before these guys leave the table. So Master of Waves trigger is going to resolve, and then Path to Exile will resolve. 1 Harbinger leaves the battlefield. I get my 3rd land, which is pretty nice. Now the second Vial will resolve. Reejerey will enter the battlefield and protect the Harbinger from dying. The opponent's Electrolyze will resolve, dealing 2 damage to the Harbinger. The opponent took 3 from the Harbinger now that he's pumped by the Reejerey. And off of the Electrolyze, the opponent drew a Cryptic Command. Pretty solid card all around. He has access to triple blue for Cryptic Command. Ancestral Vision is going to resolve. The opponent is going to draw 4 cards for this turn, hitting 2 lands, a Snapcaster, and a Lightning Helix. Pretty insane card advantage. Opponent is going to put the Flooded Strand onto the battlefield right now. Going down to 11. Now we can see, even though he's got all of these extremely powerful cards, if I just keep poking in a little bit of damage here and there, he's going to take some incidental damage just from his lands between Steam Vents and Flooded Strands. So the whole idea against these kinds of control decks is kind of an attrition attrition battle. You know, we're just trying to do 2 damage each turn, keep them off of any life gain. Here we're going to see Snapcaster Mage. Let's keep our opponent's graveyard open at this point because he's got a lot of decent targets. And he has a second Snapcaster Mage, so he feels that it might be a good idea at this point to use the Snapcaster on his turn instead of my turn. Potentially, now this is actually pretty wise. If he lets me untap and tries to path on my turn, with Aether Vial untapped I can respond, bringing in the second Master of Waves, I'll get more elementals, and none of them will die. So pretty clever by the opponent, not letting me untap my Aether Vial before pathing the Master of Waves. So nothing I can do about that. The Master and all of his elementals go away. I do get a 4th land, and the opponent's going to follow it up with a Lightning Helix, gaining some life. As I mentioned, that's something we want to avoid as much as possible, if we can counter the life gain spells. So the Reejerey bites the dust, the opponent goes up to 14 life. I'm still sitting on 3 Aether Vials. I'll bring in my last Harbinger of the Tides just to hopefully increase my clock a little bit. Draw a Mutavault for the turn. And not liking my attacks here, I'd much rather draw an Island Walk Lord and attack through Snapcaster Mage. Now we can see the opponent's hand is just pure gas. He's got all the lands he could ever want. Snapcaster, Cryptic, Double Lightning Bolt, Nahiri, and Electrolyze and Lightning Helix as targets in the graveyard. Potentially 2-for-1ing me with Electrolyze or gaining more life with Lightning Helix. So on the opponent's end step, seeing that I'm in a bit of a hole with the opponent sitting on 6 cards after that Ancestral Vision, I'm going to play out my Master of Waves here and just hope there's nothing the opponent can do about it. So he is letting these elementals enter the battlefield. I might have expected him to bolt the Harbingers in response, something like that, in order to keep me off of my elemental tokens. However, Cryptic Command can bounce the Master of Waves, so potentially the opponent doesn't feel very threatened by these elemental tokens. Now that was during my opponent's end step, so the guys don't have Summoning Sickness now. Well, I draw Kira now. Now the opponent, I already activated Aether Vial once and brought in Reejerey, so it was a bit of a false call with Kira, so potentially I could bluff out Kira this time. But with all of this power on the battlefield, it feels to me a little bit like overextending to put Kira in right away. I don't exactly know what the opponent is planning. So I do think about that for a little while. But decide to go to attacks. With the opponent sitting at 14 life, looks like with these elementals and harbingers we have a solid 2-turn clock. The opponent casts Cryptic Command, choosing to bounce my Master of Waves and draw. Not too much I can do about that. He could have, of course, done this in response to me activating the Aether Vial. But Master of Waves is going to get bounced. I can always just bring him back in later with the Aether Vial. It's one of the nice things about drawing all these Aether Vials is that it gives me a lot of flexibility to quickly redeploy my creatures. So nothing I can do in this case. So I'm going to let him bounce the Master of Waves. All my elementals will go away, and he's going to choose to block one of my Harbingers trading with the Snapcaster. In response, before the damage happens, I'm going to bring in Kira now, since I'm planning on bringing in the Master of Waves, and I want to get more devotion. So I'll bring in Kira, and then proceed to bring in Master of Waves again, now for a total of 7 devotion, making 7 tokens. The opponent with only 1 white mana has no responses at this point, so I'll make 7 elementals, and at that point the Harbinger can trade with the Snapcaster. The opponent takes 2 damage from the other Snapcaster, and he'll go ahead and untap. Draws a mana leak for the turn. He does have access to mana for Snapcaster Cryptic if he needs it for next turn. He has plenty of mana for Nahiri, especially now that he's played out his 7th land. I do have a ton of pressure on the battlefield now. So he's going to pass the turn, letting me untap. Aether Vials will stay where they are, and I draw my 4th Aether Vial, so no reason not to play that out, I think. So I tried to go to my combat step, my attack step, and the opponent pauses at the start of combat. Looks like he's going to play Snapcaster and Flashback Cryptic Command. Let's see what his modes are here. Looks like he wants to tap draw. That is fine. I'm going to tap all my guys. Now Kira is irrelevant here because he's not targeting anything. So I'm going to tap my team and then activate Mutavault after the fact. So the opponent may not realize that Mutavault is a 3-3. Might think that he's trading with Mutavault. But I go ahead and attack with Mutavault as a 3-3 and play my second AEther Vial. The opponent cracks a Scalding Tarn at the end step, going down to 11, grabbing a Sacred Foundry. So if we look at the opponent's hand here, we can see he's got 2 Lightning Bolts and a Monolith. The Master of Waves is totally not susceptible to these sort of red removal spells, also not susceptible to Nahiri's -2. So we're feeling pretty good here, especially since Kira is around. Even if the opponent does draw something like a Path to Exile, we're sitting sort of pretty here. The opponent drew an Ancestral Vision for the turn. Now we saw him draw this on his first draw step. It's fantastic then, and pretty terrible now. I don't know if the opponent's going to have 4 turns. So he chooses to activate Desolate Lighthouse right now. Oh, and he just conceded the game. I guess he had nothing he could have done there to get out of dying on my next attack step. So that was pretty amazing. I think that might have been the only game that I ever won when I got to play all 4 AEther Vials onto the table. Usually if I have all 4 AEther Vials, it's going to be a pretty terrible game. So the opponent might have made some mistakes there. It seemed like they definitely had the resources to win that game between the multiple Snapcasters, Cryptics, Paths. So I'm really interested to hear what your guys' thoughts were on that first game. Did the opponent make any mistakes at any point? Did I make any mistakes at any point? Very interested to know your thoughts. So for the second game, let's go ahead and look at the opening hands. I have a Cavern of Souls, which is extremely valuable in these control matchups. It'll help me get creatures onto the table. Again, I have a double AEther Vial hand. This time I have a Relic of Progenitus to grind out some value over the course of the game, keeping my opponent off of anything in his graveyard. I think this card is definitely worth bringing in against these sort of control decks that play Snapcaster Mage because they, over the course of a long game, which is what they're trying to do, they're trying to get the game to like past turn 10. This can keep them off of so much potential value in getting rid of Cryptic Commands and Lightning Helixes. So for me, even though I only have 1 creature, this seems like a solid keep. It's setting itself up to do really well in the mid and late game against a control deck. Looking at the opponent's side of things, he's got 7 here, only 1 land, including Emrakul, so I have to assume that this is going to be a mulligan. Let's go ahead and see how these decisions went. Oh, so the opponent on the play decides to keep a 1-land hand as a control player. I guess Serum Visions helps that a lot. He gets to look at the top 3 cards of his deck, so I don't play control. I don't know how wise this is, but we'll see how it plays out. It's going to start cracking Arid Mesa, probably getting a Hallowed Fountain. For Serum Visions, let's see what he drew. He drew a Nahiri, which is a great card for him to hit. He needs that for his win condition. And let's see. He put Scalding Tarn from the library on the top of his library. Okay, so he's got a land coming. So, so far, it looks like the keep was not just a straight-up mistake. For my turn, I hit a land. Not terrible. I'm not going anywhere really fast right now. I'm going to play the Wanderwine Hub, revealing Merrow Reejerey right now. I kind of want to keep this Cavern of Souls hidden for the time being. I could have chosen to play Mutavault, potentially attacking next turn, but I just think I'm going to play out these spells next turn. So the opponent puts a Scalding Tarn out. For my turn, I'll put AEther Vial on 1, draw into a second Merrow Reejerey. We're going to need bodies to attack and win eventually. I'm going to start off with my second AEther Vial. The opponent doesn't look like he has any counterspells, so he's going to let that resolve. I'll follow up with a Relic of Progenitus and activate it now. Go ahead and keep the opponent's graveyard open over here. He's probably just going to put this land into exile. Okay, so the opponent cracks his Scalding Tarn at the end of turn, getting a tapped Steam Vent, draws into his third land. I assume that that was put there by Serum Visions as well. So the opponent's one land keep looking like it's actually working out quite well here. Now the upkeep is a time not only when you put counters on AEther Vial, but it's also a really good time just to remember to activate Relic's first ability. Since Relic's only its first ability requires it to tap, you might as well activate it at least once every turn cycle, because you can exile it at any point, even if it's tapped. So I usually try to do that during my upkeep when I'm thinking about all my little artifacts. So the opponent exiles his Scalding Tarn. I move my AEther Vials up, and I draw into an Island Walk Lord. So this hand is developing really well. A really nice aggro control hand. I get to sit behind AEther Vials, leaving up counter magic. So for my turn, I just pass. The opponent plays a tapped Colonnade, and I'm just going to get to keep ticking up my AEther Vials and ticking Relic each turn to keep the graveyard really thin. See, the opponent has access to a Snapcaster Mage here, but with me getting rid of his Serum Visions next turn, we're going to keep him off of that value. Now the opponent hit his fourth land. That was unrelated to this Serum Visions, so the opponent drawing really well right here. We can see he has some life gain and removal in Lightning Helix. He's going to have to get rid of this Emrakul since he really wants it with Nahiri, but Nahiri's first ability, very conveniently, allows him to discard a card. So even if you get stuck with Emrakul in hand, you're always going to be able to pitch him with Nahiri. Timely Reinforcements is really a great card against Merfolk out of the sideboard. And Snapcaster Mage is never really terrible, except when I have this Relic of Progenitus on the table. I choose to bring in a Lord at the opponent's end step just to start pushing some damage potentially next turn. He lets me untap. During my upkeep, again, I'm just going to exile his Serum Visions and move my AEther Vials up to 3 and 2. I draw a land for the turn, which is okay because I can attack with Mutavault here if I want to and still leave up mana for Negate. So I'm going to do that. I activate the Mutavault, and I'm going to swing just with the Mutavault or with the Lord. I choose to attack with both, and the opponent, rather than Snapcast blocking, chose to go with Lightning Helix. I guess Snapcaster could still get some value if something goes into the graveyard. Like if he does Bolt, Snapcaster Bolt, he needs another red source for that, but that's still something he can do. Because my Relic of Progenitus is typically tapped on my upkeep when he has more than one target in his graveyard. So he's going to go for Lightning Helix now, and as I mentioned in the last game, we want to keep the opponent off of life gain as much as possible. And, prevent him from destroying our creatures as much as possible. This Lightning Helix is, again, an indication that the opponent doesn't have something like a Supreme Verdict in hand, because if they did, they would keep their spot removal for later in the game, take some beats right now, and just wipe my board next turn. Let's see what he goes for here. He's going to go for the Lord, and I'm going to cast my Negate here. Now, one of the reasons I did that is because the board removal, the board wipe spells that Jeskai runs tend to be Supreme Verdicts, so not even counterable. So this is one of the best targets for a Negate. Now remember, at this point I haven't seen Nahiri yet, so I don't even know the opponent is playing Jeskai with Nahiri. I just think it's sort of traditional Jeskai right now. So the opponent is going to take 5 damage. I'm going to bring in Reejerey before damage just to push that little extra bit. Again, feeling a little bit less threatened after that Lightning Helix. The opponent not really representing a board wipe in hand. And if he does have it, I only lose 2 creatures. 2 for 1 is not the worst thing in the world right now. The opponent's at 10, I'm sitting at 20. They're going to go for the Bolt here, and they're going to get my Reejerey. No way I can bring this guy in right now to save him. And they're going to follow up with Timely Reinforcements. Now that's a really good target for Snapcaster Mage later in the game. So the opponent does have less creatures than me, fewer creatures than me, and they have less life than me. So they're going to gain 6 life and get 3 soldier tokens. So for my turn, I'm going to activate Relic during the upkeep. The opponent has to make a choice between which of these to exile. Chooses to put the Lightning Helix into exile, which seems a little strange from my point of view, but I'm not going to argue about it. I'll leave AEther Vial on 2 since I have the Merrow Reejerey in hand. Might want to trick the opponent during combat. So once again, I'm going to activate the Mutavault and attack. The opponent will just take 3. I'll sit back on my Merrow Reejerey for the time being and pass the turn to the opponent. They drew a Lightning Bolt. A very solid draw. The opponent right now is going to cast Snapcaster. I ask which target he's looking at, and when he mentions Lightning Bolt, I'm going in response to now crack the Relic. So the timing here is not very important. I cracked the Relic. The timing is important because, okay, this is how it works. When Snapcaster enters the battlefield, this trigger goes onto the stack. He has to target a spell in his graveyard. And the spell doesn't gain flashback until this triggered ability resolves. Now, before that ability resolves, once he's named his target in the graveyard, I can crack Relic of Progenitus in response, exiling all of our graveyards. And then his ability will resolve. The Lightning Bolt will no longer be there for him to cast with flashback. So Relic could have resolved, and then he can cast Lightning Bolt from his hand afterwards. I was just a little bit sort of weirded out why he did it this way. Actually, doing it this way is going to make sure that this Lightning Bolt gets exiled also. So just poor sequencing by the opponent, I think, here. So everything gets exiled. The Lord gets bolted. I am going to draw a card off of the Relic. Now, Master of Waves, obviously a really great card to have drawn. The opponent's timing, he's choosing to play on his main phase a lot. I guess the idea is that if he passes the turn, I have a chance to draw into counter magic. I did have that negate earlier, which might have spooked him. But he did just main phase a Snapcaster Bolt, which is a little bit weird. I guess he wants to push some damage, a little bit strange. I'm going to activate AEther Vial here, bringing in Merrow Reejerey, and I'm going to block one of his soldier tokens. I'll take 2 damage. Go to my turn. I'm going to move the AEther Vial up, I think. Yep. Actually, no. Let's see. What was the thought process here? I may want to use the Master. I may have wanted to use the Master for a tap trigger. Not exactly sure. I think that was the idea. So, okay, so I'm going to start with Cursecatcher tapping down his Snapcaster Mage. I'm going to follow it up, I think. Let's see. How did this turn go? I'm going to attack with Merrow Reejerey and Mutavault. No, just Mutavault. I don't really want to get this Reejerey eaten by a second Snapcaster Mage. And I'll pass the turn for now. The opponent taps 4 mana and resolves Nahiri. Now, this is the first time I've seen her in this match. Probably going to plus her here. Putting Emrakul into the graveyard. He'll get shuffled back into the library because of his trigger. Whenever Emrakul is put into a graveyard from anywhere, its owner shuffles his or her graveyard into his or her library. Nahiri will go up to 6. So Emrakul goes. He draws another Nahiri off of the first Nahiri's ability, and plays out his Ancestral Vision. Another awkward late-game Ancestral Vision. So for my turn, I'm going to tick up AEther Vial now. I drew an island for the turn. Not really amazing, but I can still take advantage of the Reejerey tap trigger here if I choose to. Seems wise. The opponent is still at 10 life. Nahiri is a threat, but he's at a relatively low life total. I think what's going to happen, I can cast the Master of Waves, tap his Snapcaster, and then attack. And now I think I'm not overly concerned with Nahiri at this point. Cast Master of Waves, tap the Snapcaster, make 3 elemental tokens, activate Mutavault, and I think I'm going to swing with all these guys now. Alright, so I think the opponent took a little while figuring out what he wanted to do here. Yeah, I did go at the opponent's life total. I feel like that's probably the only way I'm going to win here, if I just keep applying pressure. The Master of Waves is a really crucial part of this, bringing so much power to the table. Okay, so in the end, for whatever reason, the opponent chose just to block the Mutavault, takes 4 life, going down to 6. And with no cards in hand, I'll just pass the turn. Opponent draws a Serum Vision. He's going to try to resolve that right now. Draws an island. What does he see on the top? He sees a Snapcaster and a Flooded Strand. So he put the Snapcaster from the top of his library onto the bottom of his library, put the Flooded Strand from the top of his library also onto the bottom of the library. So he didn't really like either of the top cards there. We can see the Relic of Progenitus did a lot of work. He wasn't really interested in snapping back Serum Visions. Doing a bit of math, we can see that the opponent can either plus or minus the Nahiri here. I've got a lot of pressure. Doing the math, we have 2, 4, plus 3 and 3 is 6, so that's 10. 3, 3, plus 4, 10, plus 6, 16. A lot of pressure. The opponent has 2 blockers. If he chooses to minus, he can get rid of... Now, the Mutavault's not currently a creature. He can get rid of the Merrow Reejerey, which certainly reduces the amount of damage on the table. He still only has 2 blockers, though. If he plays the second Nahiri and minuses again, remember that Master of Waves is not a legal target for Nahiri, since she is, in fact, a red Planeswalker, and Master of Waves has protection from red. So she can minus and minus, but then it still leaves 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 creatures, all of at least 2 power, attacking into 2 blockers. So I think this game is pretty well in hand at this point. The opponent does choose to minus Nahiri, getting rid of Reejerey. Plays the second Nahiri basically as a removal spell, getting rid of the Cursecatcher, and at this point I think he just has to hope that I make a mistake. So for my turn, I draw an Island Walk Lord, and I don't even take advantage of my... I guess I don't have a Reejerey trigger to take advantage of anymore. I bring it in with AEther Vial, and with Island Walk and the opponent empty-handed, even the Master of Waves and Mutavault alone could take him down to 0. So that was it. Thanks, guys, very much for watching. This was Jeskai Control featuring Nahiri the Harbinger. This deck is becoming very, very popular in tournaments right now. I feel like it's moving up the ranks of the modern metagame. We can see that Cavern of Souls is a great card to have access to in the face of things like Cryptic Command and Mono League. And Island Walk is certainly welcome against decks that play lots of islands. So thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Leave some comments. Let me know what you thought about my play, about the opponent's play. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Thanks again.